Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, which I like to entitle as Teaching Space. Now the teaching space is the area, the physical area in your classroom or whatever type of room, art room, etc. where you're teaching. Could be a workshop. If you're a phys ed teacher, it's outside, but occasionally even for phys ed teachers, you'll be working in a physical classroom with tables and chairs and so forth. So it's really important to consider the various different factors within your teaching space and how that psychologically affects your students, how it impedes or assists them in learning and developing new skills and knowledge. Now, there are 3 or so very basic different layouts that you can consider as far as your teaching space is concerned. And this applies, by the way, even if you're a teacher assistant or a volunteer or you're working in the corporate world. Wherever you're working, it's really important to consider this before classes start. And experienced teachers and trainers will come to class a few minutes early, usually 20 minutes early, 15 minutes early, depending, and move things around and set up their desks in certain ways. You don't always need to do that. If you're teaching adults and there's 10 or 12 students in a class and there's plenty of room, it may not really need to, things may not really need to be moved around too much because behaviour isn't necessarily a problem, or maybe motivation isn't necessarily a problem, but it can certainly impact on your teaching style and the way in which the class interacts with each other depending on how you set things out. So the first and most obvious type of layout to discuss is the straight rows, or the militaristic type straight rows, and that's where you'll have a traditional teaching desk here, and then you'll have straight rows of some description, let's say like that. I'm just going to draw the first couple of rows, but obviously you'll have more down there. Now, most teachers will either do 4 individual desks, as I've done there. In science classrooms, quite often you see that the desks are quite long. They're usually about 1.5 metres, depending on the age of the student, and in which case you effectively have 2 students, or you can butt each of those together. So you've got 2 smaller desks and you can butt those together to make pairs. Of course, the more students that are closer together, the more issues you're going to have from a behavioural point of view, the more social, not social problems, but the more likely students are to be social with their peers. Now, you may want that depending on the type of activities and the type of students that you've got. Some students who are quiet, some classes you will notice are quite quiet. If anything, they're too quiet, and they can also be quite difficult to teach because they don't want to interact as much. They struggle to answer questions. They don't want to, it's difficult to run games and group activities and things. But then you get other classes who are very difficult and from a off-task perspective, so you might want to separate them out as much as possible. So that is the traditional method. Now, with all these different types of layouts, all these different seating plans, it's really important to consider what we call access. Now, access means that the teacher can wander around, or the teacher aide can wander around from any location and to access any location within the class. So let's say you've got a door here. Let's say that's the door, and then this is the outside of the class, and it kind of goes like that. The teacher needs to be able to go from here to there, to here, to here, to here, to here, and so forth. They need access to every part of the room. Now, students who are commonly in trouble, who are often in trouble, will usually try and sit. Let's say there's a wall there. This is the kind of spot where those particular students will want to sit because it enables them to hide, and psychologically they can also hide a little bit, but also what those students try to do is build barriers between themselves and the teacher. So it's best if you can have this type of arrangement where the teacher can get access all the way around, and you can even stand from here or here or wherever you like to deliver part of your lesson. So if you were talking to students and you've got some materials on the board, you might actually stand here or stand here and actually deliver part of that lesson. Now, if you're working as a support worker or a teacher aide in a classroom, this is important for you as well, because for several reasons. One, if you've got a small group of students that you're working with in a class, when they come into the room, you need to be directing them, in most cases, where to sit. Some students will sit here, 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 and here. How is that going to work for what you're doing? So it's worth thinking about where you place students and just directing them as they come in if you've got a small group or whatnot. But also your job, the same as the teacher, is to understand how that seating plan affects the behaviour and the teaching style and the curriculum and the way in which students are interacting with various different activities, so that you can not only make suggestions, but you can also most appropriately position yourself in the class. So a lot of teacher assistants or teacher aides will quite often start the lesson, let's just say here, and there's 4 rows, right? So you've got 4 rows. They'll usually start somewhere around here. And once the teacher's done their thing at the very start, they might move around and circulate a little bit. So again, you need just as much access. You can ask students to move chairs around and suggest that the teacher moves students, and particularly at the start of the lesson, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously all students are facing the front here, like this. They should be. So there's very little opportunities for them to interact with each other. For these students here, to talk to this person here, they will literally need to turn around, which becomes very obvious. For these students here, they don't have much of a chance to interact with anyone except for maybe 1, 2, and 3. Now, you might want that, and you can quite easily get students to flick their chairs around and form a small group, which is a common approach. But then again, you may only want students to be facing the front, and you'll do your modelling or explicit teaching at the start, and then from there they may work silently or in pairs, and that obviously reduces behavioural issues down quite substantially, and also means that the teacher has less work to do from a behavioural perspective. Stop talking to this person, stop talking to that person, so on and so forth. So that's a pretty standard model that you see in a lot of classrooms. Certainly in high schools, you see that a lot in senior schools and things like that. And that generally is considered to be a very traditional, and a lot of people think of it along the lines of a militaristic type approach, but it also depends on your teaching style. If the desks are already laid out like that when you walk into a room and behaviour is not a problem, and students can still interact with each other if you allow them to do that, then there's no reason to really move them and to do something different. However, one of probably the more favoured ways of laying desks out, how am I going to do this one? It's called the horseshoe. It can be done in a few different ways. Now the horseshoe, you'll have the teacher at the front here, and students sit here, all facing the front. Now, this is a favourite if you've got smaller desks, even bigger desks, you can do that depending on room. This is a more favoured way of at universities or TAFE, or even for any type of adult learning, but also for senior schools, year 10, 11, 12, and sometimes year 13, depending on where you're teaching. Now, this is called the horseshoe layout. And there's obviously a few different variations. You can have students butt up against each other like that. You can spread them out a little bit more. Quite often there'll be some in the middle here as well, like so, maybe 1, 2, probably not 3. Oh, those are a different size desks, not exactly drawn to scale. Now, what I like to do when I use this particular method and when I'm teaching in those classrooms is to deliver the lesson from various different places. I almost never sit at a teacher desk, sometimes in this instance, but I hardly ever sit down anyway. Now, I like to deliver the lessons, if I could choose anywhere, from probably here, and maybe somewhere like that as well. So quite depending on how much whiteboard work you're working. And what I mean by deliver the lesson from here is that's usually where I set myself as my teacher desk. Usually I do that randomly each lesson as well, so students don't really know where you're going to be that day. If they're in a seating plan, then that's a bit of a different kettle of fish. And again, it really depends on the types of students that you're teaching and the class and so on and so forth. But consider that as an option and think about just mixing it up, because I think beginning teachers or a lot of teacher aides, even if you've got a group of 3 or 5 or whatever, will traditionally come and sit here. They might even sit there or whatever. I almost never do that, depending on the class, unless these students are sitting an exam or they're doing some type of silent reading, which doesn't require any teacher or any teaching per se. So just think about the different places of where you can sit yourself. Now, normally, remember over here, we have certain students, the 1 or 2 in every class, that are there to, or who prefer not to be doing, who want to do the least amount of work possible. Those students are going to put themselves in places like probably here and probably there. They're certainly not going to be here, and they're certainly not going to be up the front there. So these are the 2 spots, and you can see that I've positioned myself specifically next to those particular students, and it just removes that barrier and that distance that they're trying to create between themselves and where they believe that the teacher or the teacher aide is more likely to be sitting. These ones in the middle, by the way, are the least preferred. Sometimes, and these spots here, here, this is where we generally sit students who need the most amount of help. It can be quite often at the back of classrooms. You'll find, let's say there's a door here, let's say there's a door there, and these are all windows, and that butts onto another class, and you've got a wall there. Quite often up here you'll have a big cupboard. I'm just trying to think of some different classrooms and whatnot. So this area here is probably going to have the least amount of access. But another thing that teachers do like to do is to teach closer to the door so they can maintain control over those exit and egress points as well. So if that's the main door, that is not a bad place to situate yourself right there. If people come in with messages or whatever from the office, then you have full control over that without that person having to walk through the class or those types of things. Also, if that's where your windows are, if you're sitting kids outside, either to calm down or just to separate them out a little bit or whatever, for whatever reason, then you're right there as well. So don't just assume that that teacher's desk is where you are required to be as a teacher. If you're teaching 600 people in a seminar, then obviously the podium is probably the most logical place to be. You wouldn't be able to stand in the middle of 600 people and teach. That would be a bit strange. But as far as classrooms are concerned, most teachers don't utilise their desk space very often. Now, another option that you'll see quite regularly is instead of having the desk there, it might actually be, let's say that's a wall across the top, it might actually be there with that bit there. So the teacher almost never sits there, or sometimes they'll sit there but they'll face that direction. And the same with these ones. Quite often those desks will be in that corner or in that corner up there. Sometimes the teacher desks are even at the back of the class. That does happen quite regularly as well. And depending if it's your class and you can move things around, then just play around with it and see how it goes. There's always an argument for just mixing things up all the time. Because everything in education is about routine and structure and so forth, but there is a school of thought that mixing things up just to keep students on their toes is also a good idea. Now, as far as seating plans is concerned for these 2 models, we have gone through and shown where you would probably put students who need the most amount of help here, probably not directly in front, because that might be a bit embarrassing for those students and they might not want that attention, but certainly maybe here is probably a good spot because you've got the best amount of access. But realistically, with seating plans, how I generally go about doing them, I use them for all types of classes, whether they're high school, primary school, even when I taught year 1s and 2s. In fact, the lower the grades, the more stringent you are with seating plans. Now, generally, let's see, this is what you will see in primary school classes, right, is actual groups. So you'll have, let's say the door is here, and let's say there's an interior door over here, let's say over here, and you will have the teacher desk, say there, and that faces that way, and you've got the whiteboard here. Now you'll have a desk there, and you'll have a desk there, and you might have one here on an angle because we're being a bit creative, one there, and you might have a row here. Okay, let's just say. So this is what the teachers decided to do. That's an outside, let's make this one the outside door, let's call it the OD, and that's the inside door. And then over here you've got some computers. I'm just making this up, right? You've got 4 computers. Okay. Or a little rack or something like that for bags. Okay, so in this particular instance, obviously the teacher's going to spend quite a bit of time here. This might be the reading corner. This might be the location where there are your token economies or your hanging posters and things like this. Okay, so how you would go about, just briefly, how would you go about doing your seating plan here? Obviously, you would choose the 5 students or so thereabouts that were causing the most amount of problems, because normally there are between 3 or 5 students that cause you to develop a seating plan. Also bearing in mind that separating students out can quite often cause more problems than putting them close together. So sometimes putting 2 friends together who are a bit annoying while you're trying to do your teaching is better than putting one there and one there, if you believe that those students are going to try and make contact with each other quite regularly anyway. So obviously, looking at those students, you don't want to put students who want to be the centre of attention, who are off task all the time, somewhere here or on those inside sort of corners. You would want to put them, I don't know, probably in this position here because you're close to the front. This position, I'd be a bit cautious there because generally students will consider these 3 positions here as the naughty type seats. So you could put a group there, a group of whoever you wanted there, probably the group that's not so much in trouble, but those that like to have a chat but generally go okay. And the students who you really have issues with might go 1, 2, 3. Yeah, and maybe you would, depending on how you wanted to do it, maybe you would do 1 there. So other students who you don't have any problems with, but you don't want to punish them by putting them in a seating plan that puts them or pits them next to people who are potential bullies and things like that. Then again, you may have a group there, a friendship group, if they get along quite well and they're not too loud, and you can negotiate and have a good little deal with them. Some students prefer to sit at their own and just hide at the back, your introverts. I always say that it's very important to look after your introverts because they are your allies. Don't get them offside. And if you can create a comfortable environment for those people, then why not do that? Certainly don't put your introverts in the inside 4 corners. You can hide them a little bit. And there has been this push lately about social skills and about working in teams and that kind of stuff. But some students just don't want to do that. And just remember that your teaching style and your personality is not necessarily the personality of your students. So if you're an extrovert who loves to talk, who loves to socialise, who loves to learn by listening and talking to other human beings, that doesn't mean your students are. Some students prefer to learn by just looking at a piece of paper or watching a YouTube video or whatever. In fact, a lot of students are like that these days. And that's a good spot for those types of students up the back there, particularly your gifted and talented students, or your what we call those middle grounders, right? Which is another video that I've done. Now, those middle grounders can usually sit there quite well. You've got to make sure you don't ignore them or that they don't get lost in the crowd. But those middle grounders, that's a really good spot for them. And the same with those internal compartments there. And also putting students in little friendship groups like that and like that is not such a bad idea either. Now, obviously with seating plans, even if you're doing it over here, you're doing a very similar thing. You start with the few that you're having problems with, think about the best location from them, and think about the best person to put them next to as well. Remembering that you don't want to punish a student who's otherwise behaving really well by putting them next to a student who's constantly being in trouble and throwing things or whatever, if that's the type of behaviour that you're dealing with, because that's probably a little bit unfair. So the other thing that you can do with these types of seating plans is move things around all the time. So you don't have to keep it like this forever. Seating plans are quite often used so that you can learn students' names really quickly. That's one reason to use them as well. And at the start of the year, you may just randomly put students in different positions. The other reason for why seating plans, or another way to form seating plans, is to randomly have students select a number or a colour or an object of some description. So as they come in the door, let's say you've got this particular, now let's say we've got this one and you're teaching, say, adults or high school, and you want them to do some group work. As they come in the door, which one was our outside door? I think it was this one. So as students are coming in the door, you might be standing here and they might pull out a number from a hat, and that number is associated with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth, or a colour or whatever. There's various different ways you can do it. Sometimes teachers will use categories. So this particular group here, just try and make it even slightly neater. If you've come in halfway through this lecture, it might look a bit strange, but so this category might be like the dog category. This category might be the cat category. I'm sure you can be more creative than that, but you get the picture. So in that case, when they come in here, the teacher will just say dog, cat, elephant, banana, and then students will go and sit in that relevant location. So that's another way to divide students up for specific reasons. If you want them to go into, say they're doing an investigation or some type of research for the day, or a jigsaw or a brainstorm where they start here and they might move around every now and then. Most seating plans stay in place for around about 4 or 5 weeks, 2 or 3. After a couple of sessions, you'll be moving students around just to get it down pat, because your seating plans are never perfect the first time. Even if you know the students really well, you put 2 or 3 students together and suddenly students who were previously well behaved start to come out of their shell a bit, and others, you'll notice things like bullying, or some students are unhappy or whatever. So depending on the grade that you're teaching, you will tinker with that quite a lot. Most high-performing teachers never leave seating plans as they are for the entire year. At the most, I'd say every 10 weeks you'd change it up, but I think you'd probably do it even more regularly than that, especially the first 3 months that you've got a class or so. So that's basically seating plan. And now, as far as teaching space is concerned, this is one option, and it's only one aspect of the teaching space. The other thing from a health and safety point of view that you'll need to consider is the heat. So the cold, so temperature is another important thing. Direct sunlight. You don't want to be responsible for students being sunburnt if there's a lot of windows along here and the sun's coming in that way in the afternoon. So that's a really important consideration. You've also got your access and egress points. So think about that, and think about how often you've got students coming in and out, and if there are transitions and things. Some classes, halfway through the period, you're only there for half an hour, so you're in and out. Seating plans may not be even worth mucking around with, because it might be half a lesson here, half a lesson in the library, in the computer room, or something like that. So I'll just call that access. It's another thing to just be sort of wary of. I'm doing another video on transitions. I haven't actually done that yet, but I will. Transitions are really important, and one of the areas where there are lots of behavioural issues, so just be aware of transitions, and that's where students are moving from one activity to the next. So you may be, let's say this is a science class and they're doing experiments around the outside, because quite often around the outside is where there is just these big long benches or whatever. So on these big benches, students will go there, and this is where they'll have their Bunsen burners, or they'll be doing whatever, and then they'll come sit back down. Now, as they're moving from one activity to another, that's where this student here needs to get to here, and this student to there, and they need to get to the bin, and they need to, let's say there's storage all up the end here. So they'll need to pack stuff away and go back and forth 4 or 5 times, and you might be here. So this student might travel from here to pack stuff away, back to their desk, to come up and see you, to the rubbish, back to their desk. So the student's done this big dog-leg looking pattern and times that out by 25 students. So you can see how transitions can very quickly and easily lead to issues. So watch that video, because I've got some procedures and processes that I like to follow that I think are very useful once you start using them. Okay, so that's transitions. Now, another thing that's less of a safety problem, but well, I guess it is a safety problem. I like to not so much control, but there should be a routine and a process for how students, there should be a routine and a process for transitions, but also for access and for when they're leaving. So as students are coming in, there should be a very clear process and rules in place for how much noise they're allowed to make, running, taking hats off, and where they go. So if students are, I don't even remember where our door is. I think our door was over here, right? So if students are coming in here, there needs to be rules about where they go and what they're allowed to do. And generally, that'll mean coming straight here. If you're in primary classes, for example, students will be coming in and they'll need to rack their bags. If they do that inside, they might have sports equipment or clothing or something like that they need to store away. Sometimes in these classrooms are drink fountains and fridges and a whole range of other things. So there just needs to be think through. It's not a very difficult process, but think through the ways in which you go about doing that. And if you're working as a teacher aide or an assistant of some description, then you need to be aware of all of this as well, because you can't make the assumption that your teacher knows what they're doing or is that good at the job, because unfortunately a lot of teachers just aren't that good at their job. Like any profession, it's a spectrum. Some people are fantastic and then some people less so. So it's good for you to know this information, because you don't want to be a part of that staff cohort that is responsible for students getting sunburnt and melanomas or whatever. So plus temperature just makes it, if it's cold, students are less likely to, it's going to become more difficult to be able to do algebra if you're freezing cold, or the same if the classroom is really hot. Bearing in mind that different people prefer different temperatures. So it's just about finding that happy medium. In the corporate world, by the way, 22 degrees Celsius, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. 22 degrees Celsius is the temperature for what, I think it's 22.2 or something like that, is what the temperature of most offices are set at automatically, because that prevents people from arguing. If you've ever worked in an office, in a corporate office, then as soon as you get more than a few people there, they start arguing about who sits underneath the vents and who sits where, and this spot's too cold for me, and people are constantly raising the temperature and lowering the temperature and so on and so forth. So the same for children, and the same with if you're teaching adults. The temperature is an important consideration. What you're comfortable with might be freezing cold for someone else, so just bear that in mind. All right, now one other thing that I also like to talk about that is super important, and a lot of research shows that it does influence the classroom dynamic and the impact that you have on students' learning, is to put up as many posters and work examples as you possibly can in as many possible parts of the room as is available, depending of course on how long you're in there for. It's really good for student motivation and student self-esteem to display work in the class. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go crazy. You do see some classes that just look amazing, almost like it's Christmas or whatnot. But certainly you can just start by hanging up 5 or 6 good examples of work at the end of the lesson. Depending on what subject you're in, of course, you wouldn't really hang essays, but you could hang things just across the top there on the whiteboard, or on the, let's say that's a horrible example. Let's say that's a whiteboard and you've just hung a few things just with a bit of sticky tape or whatever. So that gives students a sense that you're proud of their work. It also gives them what we call public acknowledgement, which is where other students can see that they've achieved something, particularly for students who are either the middle grounders, so they don't get much attention, they cruise through, they always pass, they're not a behavioural problem, they never really get recognition, and they don't get that much attention because they're not the high flyers, but they're also not the ones at the bottom that get a lot of attention through remedial programs or intervention programs and parent interviews and all this kind of stuff. So they are called the middle grounders, which again, there's another video about that I highly recommend, because that's a very important concept. They're the students in the middle that quite often get lost. So hanging things up around the classroom, posters, yes, making it look pretty, yes, making it look educational, and it has 2 other effects as well. The first effect that it has is as students enter the room, they mentally move away from being outside, being in the playground, and their brain and changes from that playground attitude to the this is a place of learning type attitude. So it helps calm them down, and it helps them subliminally understand that they're now in a place that is controlled and structured and has a certain certain aim or a goal, and a series of rules and structures and so on and so forth. So that's one reason. The other reason is that if students quite regularly, whether it's adults or kids, quite regularly look around the room, daydream, and so on and so forth. So when they're doing that, at least if they're looking around the room, they can visually see things and read things, and that will help them remember and revise and consolidate learning that they've gone through in recent months. So, and for example, about 20 years ago, well, not 20 years ago, 15 odd years ago when I was at university, I remember one of the classes that wasn't a science class, but there was a poster on the wall that said deoxyribonucleic acid, which is what DNA stands for. And the only reason I remember that is because I looked at that poster 200 or 300 times over a period of a semester or so, and it's just always stuck with me. So I always remember that as a good example to use as to how effective hanging things around the room can be, and how students, particularly children, just absorb that type of knowledge, particularly if they're in class 5 or 6 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, over a whole year. Okay, so that is basically everything I've really got to say about the teaching space, as we call it. It's important to consider your seating plan and your seating layout. It's important to also consider the health and safety and other considerations, the logistical considerations for how it'll work if students are getting up and moving around. And it's important to consider how not only those transitions, but when they move to that second activity or third activity, how that's going to work. If they're doing an individual activity and then they're doing a pair activity, and then they're doing a class or a whole of class activity, and then they're doing a small group, an SGA, small group activity. So how is that going to work as far as that seating plan versus that one versus that one? If behaviour is not a problem, then it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter which one you choose, but you can move students around and put different seating plans in place to encourage people to interact with each other more or less. If behaviour is a big problem, then you might want to at least start with something like this, and you could have combinations as well. So we've got straight rows here, and in our classes where we teach adults, we quite often do a variety of different things just to mix it up. It also depends on how big your classes are. Some of our classes are full, and in which case if they're full, you're very limited in what you can do. Obviously, groups have the least amount of exposed surface area, so that means these ones are best, especially if they're straight squares, and for maximising space. Whereas these type of ones, because there's more surface area, just from a mathematical sort of point of view, they do take up more space because you've got more gaps between all the different desks. So if you are stuck for space and you've got a large class of 32 or whatnot. When I used to teach year 8s and 9s, I used to see this one a lot, and I never used to set the class up. I'd just be in there for an hour and then go to the next class type of thing. I used to see this one all the time, and you'd probably even, except for maybe across the back there might be, I'm guessing those classes had 32, so it'd have to be 8, probably at least 4, and usually there was a couple of desks up the back, maybe another row up the back sometimes, and they were jammed in there. Those are big classes in middle schools, which is pretty common as well. So that is my take on teaching space.